Hi, friends. Welcome to another episode of Soaring Through Chaos. And the reason we are doing this is we are in the middle of a very unpredictable time. Nobody knows what tomorrow is going to be like. Some people say the vaccine is here. Some people say the vaccine is no good. Go back to masks. So, with all this unpredictability and especially the risk of loss of life, of loved ones and friends, and a lot of jobs that have been stopped, it has created a much chaos in people's lives. And that's why I'm talking to people such as Ankit, who are doing interesting things, who very early on chose the road less taken, and even through the pandemic have found a way to continue their work in different ways. So, Ankit, I know that you go by the name of Ankit Banjara. Tell us your story. What is a Banjara and how did you become a Banjara over a period of time? Tell us anything you would like to share.
Uh, hi Shankar, and thank you for doing this. Actually, this is great indeed, and I love having conversations one on one. And yeah, I think like the word Banjara came very later for me in life, particularly because there has been a long this journey, and many people think of me nowadays as this traveler or a social nomad sometimes, or some people even think of me as a food blogger. I don't know why, but some people do think that, and I actually like having fun with these multiple understandings about me, like because it doesn't restrict me to one particular thing that, oh, this guy is like this social worker, or this guy is like this entrepreneur, or this guy is like this. So I myself in fact call myself a student more than anything else, because I think I'm a student of life, and I go around and I kind of live with a lot of people. I mean, except this pandemic period, unfortunately, where I've been restricted to my parents' house more or less. But otherwise, I'm mostly found in some house or the other house or the other house. Because to be honest, I haven't had a house of my own since 2016 or 17. I've been living nomadic. And when I say nomadic, it sounds very cool nowadays to actually a lot of youngsters. Like, how can you go nomadic? Like, what do you do? How do you have to live this life? So I always used to hear about this thing called nomad, and digital nomad. When it came to me, why I was so interested in digital nomad, because I am myself actually a postgraduate in master, like computer sciences, and with that I always used to do coding and stuff, and basically it always led me to think that, okay, I will become one day a digital nomad where I can live anywhere and code from there. I never knew that I would be actually doing coding of life, uh, like actually doing something with people. And this wasn't in my mind when I was in my graduation or when I was growing up. But yes, college days, it definitely put a seed in me. Like, if I tell you my childhood, like, which is way before college, in my school days. So I actually started doing business when I was in sixth standard. So probably I was like 11 or 12 years old. And the business was into e-commerce. Those days, e-commerce was actually like not so common. It was growing, and it was very few people used to actually make payments online those days. So most of the time I used to receive checks and demand drafts and all those stuff. So I used and the first check I ever received, my parents were so shocked. They were like, somebody has sent you a check, but where is your account? So I was like, oh yeah, I mean, I don't have an account. So my father, I still remember, these are like memories which I can never forget. And my father took me to nearest bank, and I was like this little, like height. And the branch manager is sitting in front of us, and my dad is like, can we open a bank account for him? And to be honest, those days, minor bank accounts were not again common. So the branch manager opened the bank account for me, and that began my journey into going to bank branches on my own. So I used to go with this much of bundles of checks and demand drafts with myself, and stand in front of the cashier queue. And my height used to be like the cashier level, and I had to do this to actually see the cashier. So all that happened, and that gave me a lot of experiences, like hands-on experiences with money, with dealing with the people and market. And I used to work with a company which used to do exports in Canada and US. So garments and all that stuff. So this was when I was in 6th and 7th standard. So for me, those knowledge came on very early, business and all that. So my parents always used to call me either a Gujarati or a Marwadi, how we have in India, like the business community. So they always used to call me that, said that you are not a Bengali, you are a Marwadi or a Gujarati person. So I was like, yeah, no problem. Like I really loved making money. Why? Because the passion for it was very strong for me, like the creation. The money actually just came as a value for it. So after that, I kept doing businesses, and 11th, 12th also, I did a major business in finance and many other things. And then came the time when I had to go for college. So I decided that this is what I know now from my life. But then if I go to college, I will probably be knowing much more. This is what I had an idea. So I stopped the business, somehow, and I left for Pune, Symbiosis, and Maharashtra, an early new state. The only thing I knew in Maharashtra was Mumbai back then. And Pune, I never heard of Pune before. And my father said, would you give an exam? I gave an exam, I got selected, and Pune was a whole new world for me. So it opened up a lot more things. But one thing what happened in college was that I again started feeling bored because the college education was very slow. Like they used to do this programming, which I had learned way back in 5th or 6th standards of my education. And I was like, why are they going so slow? So I started my own business again in the end of my first year of college. And this business was this time in ITES, like which we call as call centers. I started helping people set up call centers. And I got a lot of experience through that. And one of the major experience I remember is huge losses also happened in my second year of college, end of second year. Those losses had put me in a space where I had to deal with real life challenges like depression, suicidal thoughts, and dealing with investors who have big money. And I was like this 20 years old, and I at times cried in front of the investors that I am a child. But and this was like, these things actually gave me a lot of experience. So sometimes I am aware that being today who I am actually has a lot of basement foundation in it, which was actually experiencing these things on my own. So in a way, then I started my IT company after all these losses also. Then I did that work of an IT company. We started making softwares for some other people and all. But somewhere in my heart, I couldn't connect with all these things too much. Somewhere there was this urge that, I'm doing this. Being an entrepreneur is so cool. But I just didn't want to attach the word cool with myself. I wanted to do something which gives me like real satisfaction. And I had heard stories of people who left houses and then they searched for something, something, something. And, in the entrepreneurship world or in the world of business, many times people say that, uh, leaving everything is like foolishness. You have to do this, you have to do that, you have to change people's lives, you have to change the world, the common thing we hear. For me, I wanted to connect to myself more deeply, because I believed that my own change would happen first, and then probably the world's change can happen. So so I continued this in exploration, and I started going to villages on my own. I think way back in my first year of graduation. So parallelly, I was doing business, but then at the same time, I kept a side of me which went to villages, and I actually did labor work. Like I dug these, how we have this pit bore wells. So the bore wells used to be dug, and I used to do that digging with other people, and lot of labor work, lot of talks with the people, sitting with them, eating with them, and living with them also, like for 2-3 days at a stretch. So these experiences kind of kept adding to my spaces that to tell me what's the reality and everything. So finally, in 2013, I remember I joined social work professionally, which is Goons. And that's when I actually started going to the rural parts of the country more deeply. I worked in the Uttarakhand disasters, like which happened in 2013, and I was there posted for over a month and all. And I really went into the villages and saw the conditions. slowly I kept working in different organizations and kept gathering more experience and all. There was a time when I shifted to Assam to work with a grassroots organization in Bodoland, Assam, and this organization worked in like 300 villages. So I got a little more exposure, and I kind of became a very integral part of their teams. I traveled the whole Northeast, which is definitely very beautiful. People are beautiful, and then kind of came a point when I decided to leave that job thing, and I thought that no, this is, I now need to be on my own and do something. So 2017 onwards, there's this tattoo which I got on the back of my neck. And why I got the tattoo is because I always kept changing jobs and all. But then I thought that I need to really make something integral to me. So I thought, what is that what I cannot change? And that is a tattoo. I mean, practically. So I got the tattoo so that, now this is like permanent. So this is not going anywhere. So I started working on the network. Banjara is actually a network where I intend to make bridges of love and compassion. And when I say bridges of love and compassion, it's very short statement. But then the idea is to really, really see deeply that, what connections are we making and where are we making them. So through the network, I traveled and lived with many organizations, many places. I traveled like 5 to 6 lakh kilometers or maybe more within India. I walked 2000 plus kilometers in India without money, without phone. Then cycled about 2000 kilometers in India without money. So many such experiences. And I think, yeah, I mean, for now, this.
Wow, wonderful, wonderful. And then you and I became roommates in December of 2016 in Sardar Shahar at the Learning Society Sun Conference. And you were talking about wanting to be a Banjara or something like that. And I even remember asking, where's your business plan? If you remember. And I was like, now I understand. If you truly are a Banjara, then business plan is less important. Is the heart-to-heart connection that's far more important. Tell us about your journey of going from corporates and NGO type of organizations into this new phase of life that you began. From what I understand, after we met at the unconference in Sardar Shahar, you were kind of incubating it then. What changed and how did you end up becoming this, what you're doing now? Tell us, how is it different?
So, more or less, I mean, the what we kind of keep learning, across life, and I keep things very open. Like I have learned this from Vinoba Bhave also to some extent, that there is a story of Vinoba Bhave where he was in the Bhudan movement, and he was walking and walking across parts of India, and and the Congress was supporting this movement. So Congress had set up a lot of offices, and Vinoba Bhave was like this free spirit, like there was no need for office or anything, but Congress wanted it to structure a bit and all, so they set up offices. Now there was a point when Vinoba Bhave told one of his aides, and what he said that now stop everything, like just close down everything. And he was like, how, what? I mean, like we are in the middle of doing this and you are saying stop everything. How is that possible? And Vinobaji said that, this is where we start growing on ourselves and start accumulating ego. This structure will grow, this structure will become so big that this structure itself will start doing what we wanted to avoid at the first place. So somewhere my learning also did come from there, that, how what we create also shouldn't become so big, or I would say so, or we need to be very mindful of that. Even if we are making something very big, we need to be sure that we are not become power controllers or power grabbers or something like that, because everybody has this desire for power. Even you, even I have. But at what point do we keep noticing where are we actually at this level, at this moment, with power? So my journey kind of began with what you said as like Sardar Shahar being your roommate and talking about it and trying to do this. And I slowly began and I slowly actually doing it instead of trying to launch it in the world, where I see too soon youngsters get nowadays youngsters together come and they start something and they put it out in the world. Banjara network is still today not out in the world, to be honest, like as officially. It is there with people. People know about it in general. People are talking about it. Some people know. I'm still progressing with my inner journey on where to put this exactly in the world. Whether it is like this institutional thing or whether it is just a part of people's lives, and how do we actually make this more of a culture rather than making it more of a job, uh, so that youngsters feel like that they are actually adopting a culture, so it remains with them lifetime. It doesn't become like, okay, I will do this assignment, come for 1 month and go away. Rather they belong to it. So I'm looking for people who belong to the tribe, who belong to Banjara, rather than just taking it as an assignment. So to reach there, I need to first reach that place, to actually be able to go to a point where I tell people, do this. But where am I actually? So I keep noticing that, and this 3 years or this 3.5 years have been my time for experimenting and really looking inwards, and that made me actually go for a lot of walks across rural India, go for cycling across rural India. Travel was anyways happening, most more or less across India. Uh, Travel to locations which are usually not so much you know not popular as tourist locations and all that, because if a lot of people tell me that you should go to this tourist location, so I'm like, okay, if it is a tourist location, that is the last place I will go, but maybe when I'm actually totally at like leisure and all. So I try going first to places which are you know more towards less tourism.
That's wonderful. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey? It's been 4 years, and I ran across to you at the Sapne Farms with Hasmukh Sapnawala. That is the only time we met. I think we also met in Palakamandi, LSUC, in earlier in last year, I think, January of
Last to
2019.
last.
But I only saw a glimpse of you. So tell us about your journey and in what ways have you been learning wherever you are, whatever you're doing. Could you give us some examples of that?
So primarily, I would say that I use a lot of tools. So I don't want to become the tool. Like, I see NGO as a tool. I see movie therapy as a tool. I see a lot of, in fact, being Banjara is itself a tool for you to probably go to your next level. So, human beings have this idea of tools when they don't realize that they are themselves becoming a tool. So I try to always keep myself, using the tools, but not becoming the tool. So there has been a journey in which I started Jeevan Siksha in rural Assam, and we worked there with in the villages itself. And even now the work is going on. Even though I am sitting in Dehradun, there is a small team which is operating out of village in Dibrugarh district, Assam. And Jeevan Siksha has come as a result of me and some people from Dibrugarh locally, from the villages. When I used to go in my journey of being a Banjara, I used to go and volunteer at a lot of places. So the volunteerism basically was like this, that I used to help them with the strategy, team building. Then, going from outside, a lot of energy comes within the team itself. So when I went there, they invited me to actually set up an organization with them. And the moment the word organization came in my mind, I was like, no, 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 no. I'm not again going to do that, and I want to stay free. Like just flow. But then I also realized that I can actually stay free and move around, being having set up an organization. So that's what the deal with them was, that I will be there, but don't expect me to be always physically be there. I will be mentally always with you, or like in whichever way. So today that's how it is. I don't take any execution posts, like for example, the CEO or all that. I rather stay as a co-founder and I keep doing my work. So I also sometimes call myself a sevak. I mean, sometimes, like depends on whoever I'm telling this. So sometimes I actually call myself a laborer, or I would like to call myself a laborer. But sitting in this house, I don't want to call myself that because I'm actually too much at luxury in a way. My mom has been cooking for me and all that. So I don't want to call myself a laborer right now. But then whenever that thing comes, I keep doing, labor work with people. And the organization has its own set of vision and mission and all that, which organization works on. Like it's called Jeevan Siksha. And other than Jeevan Siksha, Banjara Network itself has a lot of work. So what we do is Banjara Network works like a laboratory of ideas. We kind of think about these ideas which can be extended across the country, or actually to some extent extended across the world, because they are set up on one premise that a village is like a unit. So you can actually implement any idea in a village setup based on local experiences, but then you need people to connect. So if we have somebody, let's say in Baroda region, or some villages from Gujarat, then we can talk about that idea and help them setting up that idea in villages of Gujarat. That is not through the organization. That is like we all collaborating together. It's like this network of people. It's not a organization effort. But a lot of organizations will come together as a part of the network. So a network is more like collaboration. So my work also comes as a as a curator in the network, where I kind of is the first ever Banjara of this network. I mean, not of the tribe which actually exists. Like a lot of people think that I am actually from the Banjara tribe, which I'm not, unfortunately. And I don't want to take away their, what they really are. I don't want to claim that kind of, thing that I'm that Banjara. This is just an effort to spread love and compassion. That's it. So this is what, like now the work goes on. Work is like we work in flood relief nowadays, but flood relief is not what we do. We work on mental health, community mental health in villages. And the community mental health has a lot of work to do. I mean, there we have like about 200 plus patients actually in the villages, which are coming from two districts, like 200 patients. So we kind of work with them on mental health. I mean, if there is a need for clinical diagnosis, we do a clinical diagnosis. If it is meant for counseling, then we go for counseling. Then we have a community mental health program, which also is like ASHA, like similar to ASHA, which is like, you have a health person who sits in the village who understands mental health. So, they can diagnose very quickly that somebody is going into depression or about to fall into depression. That itself saves us from a lot of problems later on, where we have to offer medicines and whatnot, So instead, we try to do that as a preventive cure, a preventive mechanism. So these kind of work is happening in the villages. I am also involved in other organizations. Like I am supporting in one organization called People Initiative for Rural Development in Karbi Anglong, Assam. And I'm also, this is funny, but I will tell you, I'm also a Shaktiman at Haridgreh. And this is a funny thing because I talk about Shaktiman a lot. Like he comes from my childhood, and I think a lot of people have watched Shaktiman, at least those who have grown up in my age time also, and who have seen this TV with only one channel, Doordarshan. And Shaktiman actually became like this story which I keep telling everywhere, and everybody kind of starts calling me, Ankit, you should tell Shaktiman story. And when I had to take this kind of designation sort of role in one friend's venture, which is called Haridgreh, which works on sustainable solutions for homes and other spaces. So the person said that, let us put designation for you as Shaktiman, because whenever there is a problem, I call you and you offer me a solution. So that is not the role of a marketing head or something like that. That is like Shaktiman. So actually my official designation is Shaktiman. And Yeah, I mean, then there are other ventures where I do a lot of support, provide a lot of support uh, informally. And I'm always open to receiving calls from a lot of youngsters across the country. And which is very interesting because 50% of my friends come from urban spaces and 50% of my friends come from rural space. So I keep getting calls from different kinds of people all the time. Somebody is calling from this state, somebody calling from that state, somebody is in depression, somebody is rejoicing, somebody is, and it happens like one after the other. So I've become so used to this that my tone has to change. So I'm talking to you right now like a very like a with a very you know solid voice, but I might be on the phone with a very low voice. So these kind of experiences have taught is even now it's teaching me so many things about people, about these journeys, and I offer my ears for them to listen to if they are in some kind of a problem. If a girl might be stuck in in a household for like a violence, then I offer that you can choose a place to go away to, if that is the need, because most of the time I've seen that there is violence, domestic violence or violence before marriage or anything like that. Many times people don't find it, or girls can't actually approach a police station because they are very scared. So going to a friend really helps. So through the network, it has been possible that a lot of friends offer their spaces. So, if somebody is in trouble near Baroda, and if you are in Baroda, I can actually connect that person to you, and that person probably can come to your house to meet you and feel better. So this is also a practical thing which I've been involved into in the back side, and we have been also trying to set up domestic violence shelters with but these are not separate shelters. These are like probably like NGOs or homes who are ready to take in people who might have to run away with their children, or sometime, but not permanent, but for some time, like for 2 weeks, so that the situation can be calmed down. So things like that. uh, we also work with the tea tribes. So we all have this chai. Without chai there is no life. Suddenly you feel like, oh. But when we talk about chai bagan or tea gardens, very few people actually know realities. Who are these workers who constantly pluck tea for us? So when we talk about tea, there is this thing about wages. What are the wages we pay? So now very few people would again know that the wages are very less. Like for example, one tea garden worker who is a lady gets about 120 rupees to 170 rupees per day, depending on the company she works with. And they have no land rights. No land right means that till the time you work with that company, you can stay in that land. The moment you have to leave the company, you have to get off that land. Now imagine it in a village scenario where people can't suddenly move away, right? Not like a city household where we can move from one house to another. So they have to go through this endless trauma in which their children can never leave this work. So the lady works, then her children will work, then her children will work. So it's a perpetual form of slavery to some extent, but nobody addresses this. The unions which have been made are very close to the management because they kind of do that. So there are these very serious issues which I actually happen to work with, even keeping a profile which is very cool somehow. But on the backside there is a lot of serious work, lot of serious issues which we as youngsters would actually work on, and these are very real issues. There is no dearth of work or no dearth of places you can work at. You can actually really start doing something, provided that you also look at your own limitations. So there was this dialogue from Singham which I very well remember, is that मेरी ज़रूरतें कम हैं इसलिए मेरे ज़मीर में दम है. And this was one dialogue. I mean, even though the film was not such a great film, but this dialogue always stuck to me. मेरी ज़रूरतें कम है इसलिए मेरे ज़मीर में दम. And I, in my last 3-4 years of journey, I have consistently reduced my needs and my dependency on anything which we call as marketed material or things like that. I think this laptop itself, or this phone itself, I have bought a very small phone, which I intentionally have kept it so that I slowly move away from the big phone to the small phone. Slowly, not like an instantaneous decision. So I am trying to reduce my needs. My income is probably at the minimum of my life ever. And I'm constantly reducing my income also. Like every year, I kind of take a lower income. So I go down. And yeah, so this is how the journey has been happening. And
In what ways has getting into this phase of life changed you as a person? Has it, as much as you have helped others, in some ways you must have transformed too. So tell us about that, please.
yeah, I suppose that was the first thing I wanted to do. Uh, Helping others for me came from the fact that I wanted to feel, you know, there was a connection which I felt. I mean, it was never about helping because, somebody would see me helping or somebody will cover me, somewhere that I'm helping. But for me, it was like a very genuine emotion. Like I remember this very well, that when I was growing up and I was in I was in 11th class, or even in my first year of college, I used to see, these things. For example, a very small child sleeping sleeping inside the garbage box or the garbage bins, and I used to walk past that, and I can't tell you how this happened, but I used to have tears, like this coming out, but because of my spectacles nobody notices them very well. So I kind of then do this. And I don't know why that happened. Many times I saw one vegetable vendor, not like a beggar, but a vegetable vendor sitting like, like this. And I just read that face. I somehow feel, I don't know what kind of connection I feel, but I feel that that guy must be thinking about something, about his day, and his face itself told me so many things. So I kind of connect to the psyche very much, when I see people, when I kind of do. That's one of the reasons I did not ever leave field work. Like I still call myself a field worker in a way, because field work is not about just going to a village or anything. Field work keeps you grounded. So for me, the personal journey or the personal challenge was to also stay grounded while doing big things. And that is where the entire, I think inner work comes in picture. Because even today, when I'm talking to you, there is a certain space of ego, which is, getting stronger. And while it is getting stronger, I have to still remember that, how do I keep it not not let it have become very big, that oh, I'm getting interviewed or I'm this person who. So my inner work happens right in the moment. There is no past or there is no present, there's no future to it. It's always in the present, like when I'm looking at you, when I'm actually thinking about, oh, this is getting recorded, this will be published, so oh, I will become a big man. The brain keeps telling you these things all the time. It is not a lie, it is always in the brain. But I try to focus my attention to the thoughts where I remember that, Ankit, you are a person. Life is of 4 days, and today is your fourth day. Always remember that. You can be gone in a moment, right away. You can probably go away tomorrow, and the world will continue. So nothing will make a difference whether you become a very rich man or whether you become a very poor man, because eventually we do what we are supposed to do, and we go away. Like how a tree comes, a tree grows bigger, a tree does its job endlessly by giving us oxygen or fruits or things like that, and it goes away. It doesn't make a noise. It doesn't say, hey, I'm a tree, or I'm a banyan tree, I'll give you more oxygen, now come and decorate me. It doesn't do that. So we human beings kind of start doing that a little more, and that is where our ego kind of takes us down much more. So I keep focus on that a lot. And yes, the yatras, the padyatras. The first padyatra, the first walk I did was in Gujarat, actually, Gujarat, from Ahmedabad to Dandi, and we were 7 or 8 of us. We walked 400 kilometers from Ahmedabad Sabarmati Ashram to Dandi, and I remember this. I actually shaved my head I wanted to get free of the hairs also. I was like, let everything go away. I kept my phone, I kept away all the money, and we walked without money, phone, anything. And such an amazing land, such an amazing state. We see Gujarat only through the lens of what the media shows us. But if you actually go to people, if you actually meet people, amazing. Like we met people where we also think about Gujarat in the context of communal violence. But if you go inside, you will see Hindus and Muslims sitting in dargah and talking to each other like anything. Like there is no fight. So for me, that was the first walk in Gujarat, and it was amazing. Like it changed my life, to be honest. Like first time I walked. Then I kept walking. I went to Bastar. We walked with the Adivasis there for 200 kilometers. Then I walked in Uttarakhand, which was 200 kilometers again. We call it the true pilgrimage. So I walked from my home, and we walked to Yamunotri, which is a Hindu pilgrimage. And we called it the true pilgrimage, that, don't go by helicopters and all that. Go walking or go and struggle, struggle. The struggle changes the person. Struggle is the main thing. So then we did a cycling journey with some tea garden children, like I mean to say the tea tribes, two of them. And we did a 1800-kilometer cycle yatra. Again, the 1800-kilometer for me was knowing Assam very deeply. And, we were like these beggars. We had no money anywhere whatsoever. And everywhere people were like so humble and so much welcoming. So how can I say that people are not good? People are good. I am good, then people are good. It's my mirror. I go to people with a lot of violence and a lot of anger, and the person responds to me the same way, because the mirror, it's getting mirrored. And similarly, the last walk which we did in South India, from Pondicherry to Dharwad, Karnataka, we had to stop because of Corona. After walking 1200 kilometers, again without phone and money. Amazing places. Tamil Nadu, oh my God. Like I am so fond of Tamil Nadu. I learned Tamil on the way, and I also learned Kannada along with my walking partner. We spoke to people in Kannada and Tamil actually, most of the times. And again, amazing people. Like people say Tamil Nadu is not good to people who speak Hindi or who are coming from the Hindi belt. But I never found a single instance where somebody would have told us, oh, you come from North India, go away. Forget about that. They used to take us to their homes. They used to feed us like their children. And so good people. Go to the rural heartlands and you will know what really India is. Don't judge it from the cities, because cities have become a bhul bhulaiya in itself nowadays. So yeah. So a lot of inner transformation happened through these things actually.
I see a lot of similarities in our journeys. Sultan Charania introduced me to walking in Gujarat. I don't know if you walked with him, the Dandi March.
Yeah.
I didn't do the whole Dandi March, but I only walked with him for a couple of days. And I walked extensively in Karnataka because I was born there and my parents were born there as well. So Salpa Kannada bartade. And I have a lot of friends from Tamil Nadu and from Bengal, so I can say Kemanacho or Nalla Irkya. So one of the things I found amazing was knowing a little bit about the local language, the local culture, the local music and dance is hugely beneficial, first to us because it opens our heart to them. And then we can really talk as friends rather than me telling you what to do. Did you experience that? What was your motivation in learning languages and other cultural aspects wherever you traveled?
Absolutely. I mean, this is one truth which, if people understand this one thing, they can be anywhere, there will be no problem. I think I am a very slow learner at languages, honestly. But at the same time, I keep trying. I forget, but I keep trying. And when people see these attempts, like for example, if I speak in Assamese in Assam, they start speaking to me in Hindi. And they will be so happy, but they will talk in Hindi. And they will be happy that I am attempting to speak the language. I'm not saying that, I'm not looking at it from this point of view that my language is higher or your language is down and all that. All languages are mine and I am of all languages, we can say that. And it's just a problem of what I can learn and what I cannot learn. But if you look at India's population, or if you look at India's people love the fact that if you don't know something and you go to them and tell them that, I don't know, I'm sorry, people will hug you and people will take care of you. So, this is what my learning is totally like learning the culture. I don't know a lot of things, to be honest. Like I am learning and I keep forgetting. My brain actually doesn't help me too much with this. But then the fact that people see that, okay, these people are not lying about it, like they don't know, so they don't know, but they're trying out. They're trying out. So we keep asking people, Acha, how do I say this? How do I say this? They will be like, oh, you see, and when people talk to us like that, we will pick up their words and try to frame our sentences. Culture, yes, definitely. I used to be a chapati eater, being raised up in Dehradun, North India. The moment I shifted to Assam is completely like rice eaters. Uh, I started eating rice in the morning, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, then in the day, then in the night. Again, repeating morning, day, night, morning, day, night. There is no chapati. Chapati would come probably like once or twice a week. And I'm talking of the majority population. I'm not talking of a lot of houses who might actually nowadays eat cornflakes and all that, which is very less population. So I became that. I now eat rice like that only. I was never a rice eater. I used to eat rice once a week. But my ability or my commitment, I won't say that it was easy, but my commitment to actually learn what the culture has to offer probably allowed me to be with people much more easily. Because I didn't have a complaint. Like there's very rarely milk in tea in Assam. It's more or less the red tea. And I liked milk tea also. But I never complain in the house that why are you not giving me milk tea? I just close my eyes, or I would just say that, what inside my heart, I will say that I am getting this. A lot of people are not even getting this. So let me accept it with a lot of gratitude. And I just take whatever I'm given. And going through that, I realized that the brain is so powerful that it determines the taste for you. But when you are in gratitude, your brain tells you that everything is so good. So developing gratitude changes your taste. Everything starts feeling tasty. A lot of people told me like Gujarati food is so sweet, so sweet. I was eating every day. While walking, I used to eat like every day. And I was enjoying like anything. Like this food is coming. It's so tasty and so delicious. So, so I think, yes, culture and language does make a lot of difference. But you have to be very accepting if you want to be with people easily, have that journey.
Indeed, indeed. Now, with all this 4 years of Banjarahood, traveling around, learning from people, learning with people, you're now grounded at home with your parents. How has life changed for you? And in what ways are you able to function or do the work you're doing? How has it changed?
So, so I've been grounded in Dehradun since June, and before that I was grounded in Dharwad when we had to stop the walk. Our walk was actually till end of Europe. So we were supposed to walk like 15,000 kilometers, but we could walk only 1,200 kilometers thanks to Corona. And uh, Dharwad, I had to stay for 3 months, which was again, we were just locked like everybody else. Actually, I would say I was in a much better situation than many people because I got somebody where I could stay easily in a house. I was worried that how I could do something, like I was, I had no computer, I had no phone, I had no money that time when I was in Dharwad because we were walking without all of that. And to some extent, without the computer or without the phone, some things get limited, So I tried my best. I raised like 1 lakh of rupees sitting in Dharwad with another person's computer. And that 1 lakh was used for distributing relief material to COVID affected people, particularly in the villages of Assam, because that's where my organization works. So at that moment, I could raise that money for the organization. and I also helped in the in movement of labor and helping out labor in some of the places through a network called Migrant Travel Support Network, which we had set up in those days, MTSN. And I kept helping a lot of, I mean, whoever I come across or whoever is referred to me, I kind of help those labor go to their places, and also sometimes get ration delivered to them. But this is a very small, like I was a very small part of it. I mean, there were a lot of members who were doing a lot more than me. And then after coming to Dehradun since June, I first thing I kind of focused on was trying to get a computer arranged for me and a phone, because these two things were not there. My laptop is in Assam, my phone was left in Mumbai. So I practically had nothing. So I kind of had to get a computer, a phone, and then I started working a lot with my team everywhere. There is a team in the villages in Assam, but then there are team with people who work from different parts of India. Someone is in Hyderabad, someone is in Mumbai, someone is in Assam also, somebody is in Delhi. We all work together to implement these ideas which we are doing. Like, for example, we are actually working on something called rural fellowship. So this idea we have been working on since last 13 14 months now, but we are now trying to make it more concrete, which is like this. Okay, like somebody coming from a village, a rural youth totally, who lives in the village, wants to work for some social work. So they can write a proposal. A proposal does not mean a very highly worded English proposal. Now what we have done is we have removed the barriers of English. And for example, let's say there is a language in Karnataka called Tulu. Now Tulu doesn't have a script. It can only be spoken and understood. So how does a person who only knows Tulu but is very passionate about doing some community work apply to us? They can actually record their application, like talk about what they want to do in a WhatsApp video voice, or sometimes make a video of them and send it to us. And we will take care of the translation. Translation is our role, our job, and we will somehow through our friends do that. So these kind of things where we are trying to focus on how to empower or enable those who doesn't have much connect with English, or for that matter Hindi also. There are a lot of people like that who only speak Kannada, who only speak Marathi, who only speak Bengali, who only speak Odia. And these are people living in the villages. So we kind of are setting up those bridges right now. And there is a program where we are setting up a library in every village, not just every 20 villages, but every village, by converting houses into mini libraries. So that kind of a work is also going on. So this is what I've been doing, in these times actually.
Wow, wow. So you haven't wasted one day from what I can see. Whereas I stopped my
Yeah.
leadership trainings and instead I started talking to people like you. This is my 133rd interview because I thought there was a need for sharing stories of people who are doing great work around the world. And indeed, what you're doing is really amazing. Do you have any suggestions? A lot of people around us are distressed, especially the youth. They can't go to schools properly, especially in the villages. There's a lot of disillusionment because of that. How can people use their time wisely? Even if they have access to a phone, it's very limiting, and they don't have access to classes or they have limited access. What can people do? How can they actually have a what I would call a COVID yatra, a meaningful time in their life?
This giving a suggestion is not easy because because everybody is so much in a different part of their journey, and a general suggestion usually would land on everybody very differently. So uh, a common thing which I could say is that try try going around positive people, try talking to people who are positive, who are doing something constructive, try listening to them. That also, because energy is like this flowing thing, energy transfers everywhere. So when you come around positive and constructive people, if you are in a space where you're not able to handle criticism and negativity, then this positivity will help you restore your own faith, and you probably would be able to think the same thing which you can now see as 0 would start looking to you as something like, for example, 8. You would put a thing in between. So construction mindset or creative mindset has to be brought in. It's not easy again, but we have this thing called internet. Now what I call internet is like a parallel life. Internet is why I call it parallel life, is because, see, in life we are taking these steps and we are going wherever we want to. Nobody can actually stop us. In a way, we decide the journey. On internet also, we decide the journey. Internet shouldn't start deciding the journey for us. So take control of the internet. Don't let internet control you. And what it means exactly is, even though you would like to have social network or things like that, limit it in your life and maybe do the most part of it, use the most part of it in some meaningful thing. For example, try reading some research work, try reading about some places, maybe in India, maybe outside India. Try reading about some work of some people who you may not have met. Try writing emails to some wonderful people, and you would be happy when they reply. Like, I write to a lot of people and they reply, and I'm like, oh my god, this guy replied. And it's not magic, it's actually, it happens. So try doing these things. I think it really would help you, provided you have an email facility. If you come from a village, and I don't even know if the language barrier exists and if English is understood or not, but still I would say this, that you know around you there is a lot of things to be done. And like, for example, agriculture, we look at agriculture as a dying thing, but agriculture can be innovated if young minds and intelligent minds can focus on agriculture and look at agriculture in a way to revive, for revival. So I would say, these kind of ideas I would give, very practical ideas. Of course, if somebody is in distress, or somebody is looking for counseling, or somebody is in pain, then they should definitely reach out to somebody they trust. They can reach out to some national helpline or state helpline or some medical facility. That is most recommended, instead of trying everything on your own.
So, Ankit, you mentioned something very interesting, which was that you are actually working towards surviving on less and less income. So, how is it helping you, and how is it helping others? Let's say you earn more than what you want to earn or what you want to spend. What do you do with that money then?
This is rather a very personal journey for me. I I don't think I would have ever gone up to a person and said to that person that, hey, you earn so much and you are doing bad to something. That is not the idea. The idea for living on less is actually a personal exploration and a personal journey to understand my relationship with everything, around me. And a lot of my friends who earn actually a lot, they support their way of helping, or their way of contributing to this world is their investment into my journey as well. Like, oh, Ankit is doing this, we need to support. So always there is this kind of a family which comes together. It is never like, nowadays we try to think in a family that everybody would do a job, everybody would go out, everybody would earn. And earlier we used to see a very different pattern, where one person used to go out to a different, like a government job, one person used to take care of the fields, one person used to take care of the cattle, one person used to do something. That is how the family would sustain itself. One person used to do, or two people used to do household work, something like that. So I'm not propagating an idea where less income should be for everyone. It is for those who really can take that step and who wants to try out, or I would say experiment. So my experiment led me to this, that I started, like, I used to earn like normally, how we earn salaries and all that. And at one point of time, I also earned quite a lot also. But when the moment I kept changing my jobs, or going more into the grassroots work, of course, in grassroots your expenses are also lower, so you have the luxury to earn lesser. So even with less income, I could save money. uh, then I slowly when I stopped the job, I had a lot of savings and I used that savings to kind of do my things. And slowly, finally, there was a time when I realized that I need to now get some money because I had to sustain also. So I wrote letters. I wrote letters to my friends, a couple of friends who are very close, and asked them, would you pay me a salary? So they were like, what salary? So I'm like, see, I work for the Union of India, or I would say I work for the Union of Humanity. And I want to derive my salary from you human beings. You know, I work for you company. In a way, it's like that. So, and what salary do you have to give? You have to give only 200 rupees. So everybody was like, 200 rupees a month is like, okay, like doesn't matter much. But can we give you the whole salary of the year together? Because everybody wants to save their time. Who would set up who would send money 200 rupees every month to me? They would go crazy. I told them that I cannot accept money for the whole year. I'm sorry. You have to give me every month. And so what I did was I started reminding them every month with a report of what I did in the whole month, sort of. And what helped in that is that, first of all, everybody got to know what I'm doing. So they got connected to that work also. And whenever somebody said that, hey, I can only give you 200, is that okay? I said, you can give me 1 rupees, but that 1 rupee should come with a lot of, heartful commitment. You shouldn't be giving me even 1 rupees if it is coming from the space of, like, I'm not interested, but let me give, not like that. So that made me earn around 5 to 6,000 rupees a month on average since last 2.5 years. And but then I realized that I have a lot of friends, like a lot of friends, fortunately, in India. And my brain was telling me to write to all of them. So I would have started earning 15 to 20,000 rupees a month very easily. So then, because to counter my brain's point, I created another thing called maximum income limit, so that I cannot go beyond that limit. So today my maximum income limit is around 7,000 rupees. That is what I need for myself now. And in the village I live, so I live in the village, so 7,000 I can survive. And also I don't like to accumulate. I don't want to accumulate. So to avoid accumulation, I did not go for a higher income. This thing kind of like, so now I earn less than 7,000. So if somebody offers me, okay, let me send you 5,000 a month, if it comes over 7,000, my job or my duty would be to transfer the extra amount to an NGO or somebody who, is doing good work or something like that. So it's a self-commitment. There is nothing called an obligation on top of me, or there is no rules, but it is my own self-made thing. And I can actually stop it anytime. The day I feel that I need more money, I can increase the income limit. So there is no rigidity. What we have to note here is that rigidity kills creativity also. When we are creative, we have to flow, If we feel 7,000 is good enough. If I feel tomorrow, no, I need to really do this classes, maybe some kind of classes, and I need 8,000 rupees a month. I can be very honest that, now my maximum income limit is 8,000. So I don't want to be rigid. I don't want to be rigid in terms of an income. I don't want to be rigid in terms of being this one thing, like, I'm a social worker, I'm a Banjara, I am this, I'm that, all that comes with life, every word. And if you feel like calling me whatever, I will be happy with that.
Wow, we've talked about pretty much everything under the sun, and I'm so grateful that you made the time. People say, oh, I have 20 minutes, but I like the flex time so we can talk about different things. Do you have any other things to say before we wrap up? Of course, we will connect everybody to your links, what you've been doing, your Banjara network, the Jeevan Shiksha, any other things that you want to provide. Is there anything else you would like to say to people before we close?
I think even being a very philosophical person, I am equally a very practical person. And I would only say that I speak to a lot of youth, so I understand that for them the first step matters. Like they say that, you can tell us about so much of philosophy, but where do we start? So I invite you, whoever is watching this, if you want to start, if you want to take the first step, you can connect. There is a lot of things to be done, and if you are interested, if you want to kind of become part of something very interesting, not just social work, but in general also, please reach out freely. Write to me. If I can't commit about calls, but you can write, and I reply to everything. I would reply to definitely everything. So that's, I think, the last thing I would say.
Great. We will share your contact information, and I will also share mine. So to anybody who is watching us, if you have any more questions for Ankit, you can either directly approach him. And if we see there are lots of questions, we'll do another follow-on session. So thanks again. And it's always fun, Ankit. The first time I was wondering, this guy looks so much idealistic, but I'm grateful that you have gone with your ideals and lived a life that makes the most sense to you and have lived with the values and the principles that you cherish so much. And I don't even want to use the word business. It's about finding meaning and purpose through work, like a karma yogi or a banjara. The labels are not as important as you said. So please stay in touch, everybody. And if you have more questions or a story to tell, I'm all ears. I want to hear about you. I want to hear about the stories, about how we can make sense during these challenging times or at any time. So thanks
Big
again,
cheers for
Ankit.
you.
And please stay in touch. We
Yeah.
never know where our paths will cross because you are a Vanjara and so am I in a different way. I'm heading towards Africa next month, again, without any big budget or anything like that, with organizations that want to me to connect with other organizations. But it's all unexpected and all quite spontaneous. So it'll be a lot of fun to connect with you wherever I am and wherever you are.
All the
Thanks
best
again.
and stay safe.
And yeah, stay safe and have fun along the way. Please stay in touch.
Thank you, Shankar.